Hi everyone. Hi Yash. You may start the session.
Okay, okay. So yeah, uh, cool. So I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool. Okay, so yesterday we discussed like how to fetch data via HTTP requests and how to process the data so that it's consumable for us. So today we are going to discuss about this local storage, like how you can store data inside your local application. Okay, so for that we have a tool called SQLite. Okay, so if you're creating an application which requires you to persist your data, means you want your data to be stored somewhere inside your application's storage directly, right? So for that we have a tool called SQLite, and this right here is opened up playground where you can play with SQLite. So before we understand SQLite, we need to understand what are databases technically. So databases are a structured format in which we try to store our data. So DBMS is a software, and database is a storage scale. So when I say storage scale, I technically call like a component in which you can store your data. Okay, um, cool. So to do now, basically what happens is databases stay onto someone's server. Okay, and you can use that to manage to get the desired output by applying some queries. Okay, and these queries allow you to actually get the data you want to get. Okay, so we have different ways to write these queries, and one of the way with which we write these queries it can be termed a particular language. Okay, so we have something called SQL, which literally stands for Structured Query Language. Okay, so uh, like the basic SQL technically deals with like, so it has syntax something like you have to select from something. Okay, so this star actually means everything. So what I technically mean from this command is that I want to select everything from this component customers. Okay, now when I talk about components, I'm talking about like I can write anything in variable. It can be a column. Okay, so it can be any field, right? So when I try, so the thing is, this is exactly the syntax of SQL. So you can try this out. Like I'm selecting customers from this, so I'll run this query and I'll be getting all responses. Okay. So this is a very famous database. It's called Northern database, I guess, which gives you multiple tables. So you can see on the right hand side we have these tables: customers, categories, employees, order detail, orders, procedures, suppliers. So what I'm currently doing is I'm selecting everything from this customers table. Okay, and I'm just logging it out here. Okay, so let's say if I want to query uh, employees. Okay, so I'll simply write here employees. I'll run it. So now I'm able to get the data inside this employees table with these many parameters. Okay, so here's employee ID, last name, first name, birthday, photo. So these are columns in which corresponding data is present. Okay. Similarly, if I want to do it with the orders, I can do it with orders. All right. So I can get the order ID, customer ID, employee ID, order date, and shipper ID. Right. Similarly, This is a basic SQL structure, right? And this works exactly like that as well. Okay. So if I want to, let's say, so this is a database of albums, artists, customers, employees, genres, invoices, media types. So technically, imagine you are in a firm which creates and produces music. Okay. So this is a database of that particular music studio. All right. So all the albums, if I want to select from all the albums, then this is the query, and I execute it, and this is the result I get. So you can see when I run and go inside this table called albums, like it's present right here. So I get all the parameters and the corresponding data to that. So I have album ID, I have title, okay, and I have artist ID, okay. Similarly, if I go with artists, then I have artist ID, I have name, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Apocalypto, likewise. So these are all the people, Frank Zappa, Led Zeppelin, right? And I will go with customers. So I get all the customers. Cool. So now, if you want to, so the structure is actually identical. If you have worked with SQL previously, then you'll be able to easily write queries for this. So what we'll be doing currently is we have a pub package called SQLite, which is the exact implementation of SQLite. Okay. So yeah. So you can just absolutely just copy this and import this inside your PubSec YAML file for your project. And we can start writing queries and we can start fetching data from our local storage. Okay, cool. So let's first of all open Visual Studio Code. Let's close this folder. So we're going to create a new project. Let's create on desktop. New folder. Last demo. Select this folder. SQF. Track. Okay. Is my font size okay? Okay, so this is a base application, right? Cool. So, so when you put data in database, so instead of storing data in form like yesterday, right? So databases provide faster CRUD operations to us. So what actually are CRUD operations? So you might be aware, like create, read, update, and delete. So these are few queries which you can do actually. Okay. So if you want to create something, you want to delete something, you want to read something, and you want to update something. That's what CRUD stands for actually. Okay. So we'll be learning like how to do that exactly with our SQLite using the package SQFlite, and we'll be understanding like how to insert, read, update, and remove the data. Cool. So we'll go here, and I will just copy this. I will come inside my PubSec YAML. Right below this Kubernetes icons, I'll paste this. Okay, cool. Now, so what happens technically, your database is actually a physical memory. Okay, it's a component which will be stored into your physical memory. So when I talk about memory, I'm talking about actually a file in which the database tables will be present. Okay. So when I talk about files, and I have to deal with files, I have to deal with files and folders. So for that, we'll be needing a file system plugin for that. So Flutter also has a plugin called Path, which will allow us to deal with our file system. So what we do technically is when we deal with these databases, we have temporary directories created, temporary folders. Okay. So when we are dealing with these folders, we need something which will allow and give us functionality to play with the file system. Okay. So file system is technically something which allows you to, give out the path. Okay. So when I talk about file system, I'm just talking about the structure. Okay. So I'm able to do these commands. Okay, I'm going to type. So this technically is working with a certain file system. Okay, so you might have typed tree inside your Windows. So tree just gives you the entire file system snapshot of your system, like where and what is present. Okay, so we'll be needing path for that, and I'll be pasting it here. Yeah. So it gives it's a package which allows us to do operation with our files by creating paths like joining, splitting, normalizing, and yeah. So we can do it with that. I can go inside a directory and I can find a particular file. Okay, and I can join them to create my path. Right. Like yesterday, we created a URL. We had two different components. First one was the domain, and second one was the changing a domain, which is something which added after the slash. Okay. Anyways, we'll just copy this up and we will paste it here. All right. Cool. So the SQLite package gives us the classes and all the functions which are required to interact with our SQLite database. Okay. And path package gives us the functions and functionalities to get the location where we'll be storing our database on the disk. So yeah, so this particular application has its own temporary directory where it stores its things. Okay, so path will help us to exactly get the path of that. Okay, cool. So what we'll be doing technically is we'll be fetching our data uh, like we do, and for that we'll be creating a table. So we totally understand what a table is from this example. Okay, so these are the tables, the table list, and inside tables we have some data stored. Okay, and inside this we have different fields, and fields contain all the exact data points corresponding to our parameters. Okay, so if I have employee, I can execute this and I'll get the employee table, which contains all the different parameters like employee, last name, first name, title. Okay, so we'll be creating a similar table for ourselves inside our application. Okay, so okay, so I'll be creating a so whenever I want to consume something, whenever I want to get some data, like yesterday we discussed, right? We were getting a JSON response and we were creating a particular model class for that. All right. So we will create today itself. Today also, I'll go inside my lib, inside src, and inside this I will be creating models. Sorry. Okay. So inside models, I'll be creating another file. So let's create something for an employee. Okay. So an employee has an age. Okay. A person. Let's talk about a person. A person has an age. A person has a name, and let's say a person has a particular ID. So, and I'm adding an ID because ID is something we call in database is a primary key. Okay. So a primary key is something which can never get repeated and it's always unique, right? So let's say if I talk about a person in India, so what will be the primary key for that person? Maybe his Aadhaar card, right? Or so likewise, a primary key is something which stays unique always overall. Okay. So let's create and name our model as person model. Okay. So now I want to create a model. So what's model technically? A model is a simple class which you'll be using to create objects and instances to play with your data or to get your data in a particular format, right? So when I create model makes sure that all the data types are preserved, right? So I'll create a class person, and I will name it, since I want this data to be absolutely constant, I don't want this to change. So I can add a final keyword if I want. Okay. Now I want to have a few things. I want to have a person name. Okay. I want to have age of the person, and I want to have his particular ID. So ID can be anything. Let's say ID is Aadhaar card or Aadhaar ID. Okay. Likewise. So I need to create these things, these three properties inside my class. So let's first, name will be a string. So let's name, okay, and age will be an integer. Okay, and ID will also be an integer. Okay, so let's add final. So we need not to give some extra load on our, okay, cool. Now what's the issue? The file web name must be initialized. Okay, so this is telling us to initialize something, right? So let's just dump this as of now, but it will be initialized when it comes in the later course, right? Cool, cool. Okay, so let's remove this final to create any confusions. We'll add this afterwards. Okay, cool. Now, when we create a class, we also need to create a constructor of the class so that we need not to make our code redundant. Okay, not an issue, Gopi Krishna. All right, so we need to create a constructor now, and the constructor absolutely is a method with the same name as its of the class. Okay. So I want this to be named constructor, right? So first let's create this dot id, this dot name. Yeah, sorry, and this dot age. Okay, so I want these to be named parameters. So I will just add these curly braces. Okay. So yeah. So before we create a table, we were required to create this model so that we can absolutely visualize like what kind of data we'll be creating and dealing with. Okay. So our person class has these common three properties. First is name, second is age, and third is ID. Okay. Now, now we have to do something called opening a database. Okay. So when we are reading and writing data onto a database, we actually want to open up a connection between our database. Okay. So this connection can be made by initializing a path. Okay. And that's why we imported the package called path so that we can absolutely reach to the exact place where our data is stored, right? Cool. Then we have to go into our, okay, so this is ready. So let's go to our main and remove all of this and write our own code. Okay, I'm importing the material package. After that, I need to create a main function. Okay, so now I have to create a run app, which will be my app. Okay, but for the time being, we are not going to deal with that. Let's just comment this. Before that, I want to let you know about something important. So yesterday we understood like what async and await are. Okay, so we came to know like what is async, what is await, and where to use them. Just like we use JavaScript promises, we want to initialize. We want this function to get executed, and afterwards the data which is being given out from this, I want to use this data and consume this afterwards. Okay. So we understood like a function should have a async keyword. So since we are dealing with database here, we are dealing with some external factor, okay, and we are not sure whether that factor will absolutely return it 100%, okay. So whenever there's a case like we have to wait for the response to come, or we have to wait for some internal factors which may affect its availability in the future, we try to use these promises, or let's say these async and await, okay. So this is the main function. So when I want to use async and await, I absolutely assign async keyword right after my function. Okay. Is it all right as of now? Cool. Okay. So now, cool. Now we'll be creating our function. Okay. So I will define database first. So absolutely, I have to declare. I have to declare a database. Okay. So I will create final, and I will name this as database. Okay. Now I will use the open database function. Okay. So open database function specifies the schema version of the database being opened. This is used to decide whether to call onCreate, onUpgrade, or onDowngrade. So these are just methods. Like onCreate is something which will be executed when you install the application for the first time. Okay. Similarly, onUpgrade, onDowngrade are the respective functions as the name suggests. All right. So yeah, these will be executed when for the first time your application is triggered. Okay. Cool. Okay, so I want to open a database. Cool. Now it's asking me for a path. Okay, so we imported especially that path package to get the path, right? So we need to get the path, right? Okay, and you can see database takes up a future, right? It needs to be a future kind, right? So I will just add future here. Okay, and what I want is database. Is it clear like what we are doing right now? Okay. Now I want to insert my path between these lines, right? Cool. So for that, yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you. So for that, I'll be opening up and I'll be using this join. So join is used to give out the path parts. Okay. So let's say I want to go inside my desktop. So first I have to go inside to my C drive, then into my users, then I'll select my user, and I'll go to the home directory, and inside from home directory I'll be going to my desktop. So I can catenate these, right? Concatenation, you might be aware about concatenation. So concatenation will technically uh, merge this part with that part to create a meaningful path. Okay, so I will take in join. Okay, and then I will, since I'm using async, now I have to await for something, right? So I will use I first of all I need get database path method. So this will get the path, and then I have to name my DB, right? So I will name my DB as person data dot DB. Okay. Okay. Am I making sense? Okay. Yeah. Cool. So we are inside open database right now. Now open database has multiple methods, right? It has on create, on upgrade, on downgrade, read only, on open, on configure. and it has something called version. So let's say you have a person database, and in this you are storing 2 person, and these 2 person are from your home place. Okay, and you create another database. So for that you'll be creating another version, and this time these 2 person are from Dubai. Okay, so that's how you. So using version count, you can actually keep track of your database version, and you can play with them. All right, like you have. Okay, cool. So now I have assigned this path, and this is giving me the exact database path, and this is the file in which our database components will be stored, our tables will be indexed. Okay, cool. Now I want to use the function called onCreate. Let's first assign a version. So I'll name this as version 1. Okay. Now I also need to use this function onCreate, which will actually do like what it says. It will onCreate will trigger something. Okay. So the first thing I want to do on onCreate is I want to create a table. Okay. So onCreate will take a function. Okay. It will take a function, and the function will have 2 arguments. First one is database, and second will be an integer. And what that integer will be, it will be our version. Okay. So I will type here db and version. Okay, cool. Now I will go inside this function's body, and I will return. Now here I have to return a script, right? So you can see on this we have this query or the script, let's say, and we want to execute this. If we don't execute this, we actually are not able to process this. Okay. So the first execution I want to do is I want to create a table. All right. So what I will do is I will return db dot. So there are multiple functions available to me. I can close the db, I can get the version, I can set the version, I can delete, execute, insert, query, raw data, delete, right? But what I'm actually interested in is execute, because I actually want to execute it, right? So I will click on this, and here I have to write the query. Okay. So to write a multi-line queries, okay. Oh, see, you can see when I try to write strings, okay. Let's say I want to write create something something, and then I press enter. So string starts to give me error. So to write multi-line strings, what you can do is you can just type in here. Okay. So now you can see, now we can type as many lines of code as we want, and string won't give us error, right? So this is the syntax how you can write multi-line strings. So I want to write queries like this, right? I want to create a table, right? So these are all the queries which I can go with. So let's see, to create, do I have something? Yeah. So if I want to create a table, then I can write create in capital, and I can just name the table, and I can add the properties to it. Okay. So it's as simple. So they want to create a table called contacts. So for that, I will first name my variable. So this is contact ID, and then I will write integer. Okay, because it is a type of the data type of this contact ID, and then I have to assign a primary key. So in our case, we have 3 properties, right? We have ID, we have name, and we have age. Okay. So what will be the primary key for us? The ID. Okay. The ID will be the primary key for us. Similarly, we'll be having ID, we'll be having name, and we'll be having age. All right. So I'll head back here, and here also you can access the way to write the query, right? Cool. So I will type create table, and I want to name it, let's say, person. Okay. And inside persons, I want to write ID, user ID, ID, age, and name. Okay. So ID is what? ID is an integer. All right. Then I'll add another one, which is age. Age is also what? Integer. Then I will add name. So what is name here? Name will be of type text. Okay. Now we have to define a primary key. So I know that ID is a primary key, so I will write primary key. Okay. So before we move further, I want to know whether all of this is clear or not. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay. So now we have written the query to create our table. And the table will have three parameters: ID, age, and name. And our integer is the primary key. Primary key is what? Primary key is something unique which allows us to actually index to that particular data point. Okay. So we defined our version. We wrote our onCreate function. I hope it's all right. Okay. Let's format this. Cool. Okay. Okay, cool. Now we have this thing entirely done. So this part was what? This was opening a database. And we will, when we are done. Okay. Now I will just scroll down. Now we have created our table. Now we need to learn how to insert data into this table, right? So I want to insert a person. Okay. So how can we insert? So let's go and search if I have something to insert. What's the exact syntax to insert something? Uh, okay. So if I want to insert something, then what will I do? I can try this, right? Yeah. So insert into artist name, insert into this, right? So I can do this, and also SQL provides me a different syntax as well. Okay. So we can do that as well. Okay. So we'll just look at SQL part. So before we try to insert, so we need to create a function. So let's call this function insert person. Okay. So I want to insert a person. Now again, I want this function to be an asynchronous task because availability is not sure. There may be some underlying issues, right? And I want something to get fulfilled. So again, I'll be using async and await here, but async, and I'll be awaiting something whenever I write some code, right? Cool. Now, what will be the return type of this function? So since it's an async await and I want to return a future, right? So I'll be writing future, and in our case, it's not returning something, so it will be a void. Okay. So this is a task. This will not return anything to us. So if we don't want to do something, we just want a block which will do something for us without returning. So this is something like that. So we don't need a return type for this. We won't be returning anything. So it's void, right? So inside insert function, I need to first initialize and reference my database, right? So I used to use this keyword called db. So I'll be using this here as well. I'll create final. I'll call it I'll use database. Okay. Now write db, and what I want to do is I want to await a database. Cool. Is this clear? Okay. Cool. Now I will add semicolon here. So now I want to insert the person into the table, and also I need to specify like what has to be inserted, right? So we have a function inside this database. It's called db.insert. Okay, db.insert. Now here I can add table and what value for that table is, right? So the name of the table which we created here was persons, right? So value will contain what? It will contain persons, and sorry, name will contain what? Table persons. Here it will be name, right? Name, that means persons. Okay, and rest of the command will be typing out. Okay, cool. So the name of the table technically is persons, and again it will be of await. Okay, cool. And now what we want to do is we want to actually map that data, right? So we have these ID, and against ID we'll be having some return ID, right? Against age we'll be having some age, let's say 42, 32. Against name we'll be having some name, so let's say Narendra, Suresh, some kind of name, right? So we have to map them together. So what I will do is I will type person dot map to map. Okay. Okay. So I have to okay. Am I indexing this model? Okay. Cool. Yeah. So when we come to a person, we actually did not create the instance for this person, right? So what we will do is we will type here person. Okay, and I will type here what? Person. So for this, we have to actually import the model. So we did not import the model for ourselves. This is why we were getting this error. So now, what's the issue here? To map. Okay, not an issue. Cool. Okay. So now we are awaiting db.insert and we are looking in what table? We are looking in persons table. And then we want this person to map, right? Try getting a name of an existing method or defining. So you can see whenever I type person, I get these options like age, ID, name. So that's the benefit of creating models. Okay. So I want this to map. I'm not sure why it's not taking it up. Anyways, let's move forward. Okay. So now there's one more thing called conflict algorithm. Okay. So conflict algorithm is something which allows us to reduce redundancy in our code. Okay. So when we are dealing, let's say I created a person called Subhash. Okay. And I created another person with exactly the same parameters, like the same Aadhaar ID and the same age and the same name. So conflict algorithm, without conflict algorithm, what will happen is there will be two instances created inside our database with the same exactly same details, right? So we don't want that, right? We don't want our data to be redundant. So for that case, we have something to tackle called conflict algorithm, which will do what? Which will just replace if there is a pre-existing version for it, right? So I will simply type conflict. So let's say what it takes conflict algorithm dot. So we have different methods. We have conflict algorithm dot abort, which means it will abort what we are trying to do. It will stop it instantly. Secondly, it will give out a fail, and you can even ignore if you want all the two instances to stay. Then you can ignore, and you can even replace or roll back. Okay. So in my case, I want them to be replaced. Okay. So are we good? All right. So after this, also we need to import one library for that async. Okay. Are we doing good or is it okay? Cool. All right. So now we are at the replace part and we have already inserted our data into our table. And now we want to know like where to actually uh, insert this, right? Okay. Now we want these all details to arrive inside a list, right? We have three properties and we want to list them. Okay. So I want them to arrive in form of a list. So I want a dog. I want a person's list, right? Cool. Okay. So what I will do is I will again write a function and okay. And what it will do for us is it will again be an async type and which will return us what? It will be a future and it will be a map and that map actually means the key and value pairs. So we know that key and value pairs will have string and dynamic. Okay. So if it's not making sense as of now, it will do make sense. Just bear with me. Okay. So now we are going to add some query, which allows us to exactly fetch the data and map it to a string dynamic into a list. Okay. So I will type final, and I want a list, and the list will be of what? It will be of map and string dynamic. Okay. And then I have to name this list because I'm mapping it. So I will name it maps, and I will add what? db.query for okay. So we have not initialized our db. So like we initialized it here, I will just copy this, paste it here, and now we're good. Okay. Cool. So this function needs to return something. Okay, and we already know what it is trying to return for us, right? It's a future type, and we have return type of map string dynamic. Okay. So I will return a list. So here's a function called generate. Okay. So what it does is it creates a list with position and fills with the values created by calling the generator function. And it can be in the index from 0 to length, like what's the length which we define. Okay. And it will be an increasing order. Cool. So I will type this. Now I have to specify my length here, and I have to write a function like what has to be done and what has to be exactly filled up. Okay. So in my case, I want my length to be exactly equal to the map which I'm getting. So it should be maps dot length. All right. And then I want to run this function. Okay. And what this function will be returning exactly. Let's just ditch this as of now. Okay. This function will be returning me the data inside the dog model. Okay. Or all the corresponding values will be returned here. Okay. So I'll be simply typing return. Yeah. So I have the database, I have the person, I have the map. Okay. Cool. Okay. So here I have to write my generator function, and my generator function will absolutely return the person class which I created. Okay. And it has these name parameters: age, ID, and name. Okay. So in front of age, I have to actually write my maps, and inside maps I have to specify the index. Index is what being the iterator for this function right here. Okay. So it is what which is going to take up the value for corresponding to that. Then ID. Okay. then I have name, and then I have maps for that index, and for that I have name. Here I have ID. Okay. Is it fine as of now? This has to be list here. We are going with persons, and what do we want to return? We actually want to return here list of what? Person. Okay. Cool. So this is a function persons. What it's doing is it's converting our we want our list to be populated with the data points, and those data points are in the form of map. Okay, and these are of string dynamic, which means the left hand side will be in form of string, and the other hand side can be dynamic because it can be an integer, it can be a string. Okay, now we are awaiting it by calling it from our we are actually typing a query which will query our persons table, and we are waiting for the response, and that response will get stored inside our maps. Okay, and the type of it will be string dynamic. Okay, now what we are doing is we are generating a list, and the list will be exactly equal to the length of the map. Okay, and then we have written this generator function. That's what list.generate takes in, and that's how it works. And then it's returning a person, and against that we are assigning our map and the IDs. I hope it's clear. Oh, okay. Sorry. Cool. So now we have age, name, and ID, and age, name, and ID. Cool. Thank you so much. Let's just format this document. Okay. Cool. Is it clear as of now? Like what we exactly did? Let's go to the start. I'll explain again. So we have imported these files. We have a main function, and then inside this main function, we have defined a database, and we have opened our database here. Okay. And I have used my join, which was provided by path. Okay. I've added a version to my data, which I'm storing into my database table. And then I'm typing an OnCreate script. It's an SQL query, which will create a table for me. The table name is persons, and ID, age, and name, right? Then I create another function. Okay. I'm inserting a person. Okay, and I am initializing my database here, and then I'm awaiting database insert. So this insert function will actually insert data into my person. Okay. Is this clear? Okay. So we are done inserting. We have created persons function, which is mapping our data. Okay. So we have database assigned again, and we have a list map string dynamic, and we have maps in waiting from persons table. Then we are returning a list or generate with a generator function here. Okay, cool. Okay. Now we have done, we have different ways, right? We have CRUD. So we are done with the C part, which was creating, which was actually adding into our database. Now we'll be proceeding with the update part. Okay, we'll come back to the read, but let's first create for update. So like we created for insert, we'll also create for update. So we will again create a function called update person. Okay. This again has to be in async await format, and again it will return a void in form of future. Okay. Cool. Again, we have to initialize our database to reference it here. This is actually called referencing a database. Now, like we did db.insert, right? We will again do the same. Await db.update. Now I have to add the values, and the value is persons person to map. Okay. Is it fine, guys? Okay. Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah. Again, we are putting it into map. Okay. Now we will be writing a where clause inside this. So what where clause will do, it will find for a particular ID. Okay, since ID is our primary key, that's why we are dealing with ID here. Okay, so ID equals to, I can write it like this, person.id. Okay. What actually is the issue with this? Person dot. Okay, before we write that, we need to make sure that there is a certain kind of attack called SQL injection or SQL injection. Okay, so there are two ways to actually avoid that. Okay, one way to actually avoid that. So what will happen if I will write my person.name here with string interpolation? Okay, so what may happen is SQL injection attacker can actually attack me. Okay, so to avoid this, we have a safety check in multiple databases, in multiple query languages. So what we actually do is we end this right here. Okay, and we type where arguments, and inside this we type person.id. Oh, what's the issue exactly? Oh, okay, I'm not passing. Okay, cool. So yeah, I have two ways to write. Okay, so if I write it like this, then someone can hack into my system and get all the required thing by doing an SQL injection. So if you're not aware about SQL injection, so what people actually do is they go into our search boxes, okay, attackers, and they write some malicious script like this. So actually, this is not a malicious script, okay. This is a script which just updates your query inside your database, okay. So if you write something like this, then this exact thing will get copied away right here, and this will be carried around in form of a query. And when this will go inside our database query, just like this, okay, it will manipulate a lot of things for us, okay. So to avoid this kind of mishap, we take in use of this method by using where arguments. So this exact same thing we'll be writing in another named parameter, and in place of question mark, this thing will get actually filled up. Okay, so this is an advantage to avoid SQL injection into your SQL servers. Okay, cool. Like people do write these kind of things, and by that they are able to retrieve and even log in, even if it's not allowed to log in. Okay, so it's a good thing to keep a check on this. Okay, now we are done with create, and we are done with update. Okay, now we are just left with delete and read. So let's just go and create another function. This time we'll create delete. So again, I'll be creating a future type return with void. Okay, and I'll type delete person of the instance person, and I will again initialize my DB, my reference, my DB equals to await database. Okay, and it has to be an async type. All right, cool. Now I will again write await dot db dot delete. Okay, now what I want to delete here. Okay, so I will simply type here from the persons table. I want to delete something where ID equals to this question mark again, and where arguments are equal to my ID. Okay, cool. Cool. Now let's try the name is under. Okay, not an issue. Previously we were writing person.id. Right now we are just writing ID because that ID can be anything which we are going to provide, right? Okay. We are fine until this point. Okay, cool. So when this feature ends, now we will actually add a person. So let's say I have a variable and I'll name it some guy. Okay, and this will be an instance. Okay, his name will be, let's say, Sam, and age 34. Okay, and ID will be what? 0. Cool. Now, is it clear like what we're doing? Okay, so inside our model class here, okay, we have a string name, we have integer, we have ID. Okay, we have our constructor. Now we need to create that to map function, which was not with us. Like yesterday we created, right? We created from JSON, we created to string. Similarly, we have to create a to map method inside our model. Okay, so I will be creating a to map method. Okay, now what this actually will do? So we know that the responses which we were getting yesterday and the way we store our data, it's in form of key value pairs, right? So, but when we query up it, we are going to actually populate our list with the map which we are receiving. Okay, like we did like about 10 minutes ago. Okay, so we have to create this to map function. Okay, so now what will be the return type of this? So return type will be map of string dynamic, because we can have a name, we can have an age, and integer. So it can be a string or an integer in our case. So it will be of string comma dynamic. Okay, now what we are going to do is we are going to actually return our ID, which will be equal to ID. We'll be returning our name, be equal to name. We'll be returning our age, equal to age. Okay, all right. So we have to map function. Also, let's create a string function. So let's call string, and we want to create a toString function. Okay. So we will just return and it will be the ID. Okay, name will be name, and age will be $age. Cool. Yeah. So now the two map issues are gone. Cool. So this is something we just did into our model class. All right. So is this clear? Is this clear as of now? So we had this query. We were creating a table. Okay. And inside this table, we wrote this particular query. Okay, cool. Can you please explain the line number 62 where you have used ID in where arguments? Okay, so see, Amanpreet, for deleting we need an ID, right? And that ID can be anything. Okay, it can be like, let's say I have created a person and that person has a particular ID. Okay, so here inside this, since delete will only work if I pass an ID to it. Okay, so in this case I actually have to pass an ID, so it will be int ID. Okay, cool. And it's of what, async type. Cool. And since I have to define my database again, then I will just copy this. I will paste. So now everything is in place. So delete person will only work if I pass an ID to it. Okay. So in this case, I was adding person.id because I'm updating a person and I need an instance of that person, right? But for deleting, I actually don't need an instance. If the ID corresponding to that person is present, then it will delete it. Okay, so this is a way to actually avoid SQL injection. The same thing will work if you write it like this. Okay, this will also work, not an issue. But this kind of practice, like this DB, SQLite already has this functionality. Like you can type your arguments, and the arguments is the data actually you want to return from your database. So this kind of convention is followed to avoid any security threats for your system. Okay, you can actually. Okay, I want this to be mandatory. Okay, so yeah, there is something called sanitization. So when you have these SQL injections happening, so this exact thing which we are doing right here, this is called sanitization of your string. So your query actually will be a string which you will be accepting from your user, right? So to sanitize that, that means to make it foolproof, to do not allow any kind of to any hacker to hack into your system. You use this sanitization, and that's very important. Okay, I hope I make myself clear. Okay, cool. So now we created this person called some guy, right? Now what we want to do next is I will just add it into a table. Okay, so we have insert function already done. We have insert available. Okay, and we have update here, and we have delete. Okay, cool. Now I have created this person called some guy. I want to insert it into my database. So since we have already kept our code very modular, so it's very easy to actually insert, right? So what I will do is I will simply type await and I will insert person, and then I will pass what? I will pass this some guy's name. Okay. Yeah. So as simple as that. So now I have updated my file, my person. The name of the person is some guy. Okay. Now let's see what happens when I try to print this. I want to print the exact person's table. Okay. So let's try to run this up. Okay. So you can see I have not initialized any run app function here. Okay, I'm not running it on anything. I'm just simply dealing with database right now. In the starting I added a run app because I wanted to create a material app or something like that, but I totally avoided that. Okay. Okay, we have some issue. If you are running an application, need to access binary messages before an app has been called for initialization. Okay, so there's a thing called widgets flutter binding ensure initialized. Okay, so what happens when we are dealing with something like when we need a perfect initialization of something. Okay, so we have to add this line to avoid any upgrades or the future references of our database. Okay, so I'll explain this in detail. Just first let me copy this. Okay, and let me just add this here. Now let's see what happens. Okay, I'll have to break this application and we'll have to rerun. Okay, you can see this is very important for us right now. So we added this person here. His name was Sam. Okay, and you can see his age was 34, ID was 0, and we actually got that right here. We first created that particular person inside a person's table. Okay, and then we printed that. Okay, so and we got it exactly the way we wanted. So we have successfully inserted our data into our SQLite database, into our SQLite table of persons. Okay, is it clear? Is it clear? Amanpreet, Varun, Shubhangini, Pranav. Cool. So we are able to actually insert and we are able to print that out as well. So we can read it as well, right? Okay, cool. So now there are a few more functions which we created, like updating it and deleting it, right? So now let's try to update this. Okay. So I will just go down here and I will update this some guy. Okay. I will exactly copy this. Okay. Now what I will do is instead of writing this, if I exactly push this up now, what will happen? It will absolutely replace it with some new data. But I just want one value to be updated, not the entire data to be replaced. Okay, so what shall I do? So what I will do is I will remove this and I will type some guy dot name. Okay, some guy dot age, which in this case is 34. We know that. Okay, and id, let it be id. Like I just want age to be updated, so I want this age to be 50. Okay, so how much I'll plus 16 to this. Okay, now when I'm done changing this, I will call my update function. Await update person with some guy. Okay, now I'll bring the application and I'll run it. There's no need to break. I just wanted to show like how it's going. Okay, there seems to be some age 34 of 8%. Okay, let's just try to do this somewhere.id. Okay, age is not updating. What could be the issue? Okay, let's go into our update function. I think something is not working. Okay, we have this assigned. We have our query ready. We have where we have our arguments. We have person.id. Okay. Yeah, Amanpreet, that's what I'm doing. I actually forgot to print. Okay, I actually forgot to print it. Such a silly mistake. Okay, so now previously it was 34, but after update it should actually get to 50. Okay, and after this we have also this delete function. So we will just delete this up. Okay, so first it was 34, then it was updated successfully. Now we will also take in use of this delete. Okay, I will just copy this. I will paste it here. Okay, now I want to delete. Now delete function is not like update person and insert person. It has a parameter type integer. Okay, so delete will actually take the ID. Okay, so I will type here delete person, and this will take the ID. So let the ID be some guy.id. Okay, so now what should happen technically is now we should see an output this, and after this delete person there should be an empty list right here, an empty set. Okay, so let's save this, break this, let's run this. Okay, somewhere one argument accepted one, and SQL delete from person where ID equals 0 arguments. Okay, okay. So we have some issue with the delete function. We have initialized our database correctly, and we have awaited db.delete, and we are going inside persons. And oh, okay. I actually have to add. I can only use one thing. Either I can do that or this. Okay. Yeah, Manpreet. Actually, I forgot to erase that. I was explaining someone the difference between where arguments. So there's no need to actually run it on a physical device, but since it's attached to my system, so it's running. Okay. It will not show anything at all because we are not even initializing our run app function for this. My PC is getting slow. I'm not sure why. Okay, so yeah, now we had this after inserting data, and we had this after updating data, and we had this after deleting data. So we are successfully able to do all the CRUD operations. Okay, with our what local DB. So what's exactly the advantage of using a local DB? So let's say you are using Instagram. Okay, so when you use Instagram, you are aware that your profile sometimes that cache it out. Okay, so when you open your profile too many times, so Instagram has this logic defined, or you can even define it in your application that if some user is accessing a particular data a lot of times, so you just want that data to be stored inside his device, right? So you can actually use this feature for that. So let's talk about the Mintra application. If you have used Mintra, okay, so let's say I want to search for a product, and that product is, uh, let's say Puma sneakers. Okay, so you can see when I search for any product, I see these many filters available. Okay, and these filters keep on changing about what I search. All right, so if I search for something, yeah, so you can see I get this ankle height, I get bundles, I get country, I get insole material. So I will not get these type of filters for a sari or a female suit or a shirt, right? So how is this happening, right? You might be wondering that they are actually keeping check on the data. Like let's say if some user selects Puma, then they will actually call the entire object of the filters. Okay, so this ankle height is a filter only relevant to the shoes. Okay, it will never arrive for a shirt or a lehenga chunri, right? So what how in case of websites, it's actually easy to do, right? But in case of application, you have to actually call a lot of things, right? So what companies like Mintra do is that they actually call the entire tree. Okay, so they need not to call their servers again and again. So they save their input output write operations by that. So you might not even be aware, but if your internet stops in between, then you can even access the filters. That's happening because Mintra is actually sending the entire filter tree into your application, and you can use it irrespective of the data. So likewise, they are saving their input output or API calls. Okay, so the API calls is being saved by that. So it's a very good thing to actually store these kind of things into your application, and you can using this you can actually decrease your server costs. Okay, so there's a similar plugin for Flutter as well. If you want to use, then you can use it. There are two plugins. One is Flutter Tree View, and second is Flutter Tree. Okay, it does just what it says. Okay, so if you want to create a local data to be saved inside your DB, then you can absolutely use this. Okay, cool. Also, like in SQLite, we had these many. We had ID, we had age, we had integer, we had name, right? But what if you want to call a list or a map or let's say an object or something like that? Okay, so there's integer, there is text, but there is nothing like list or something like that. Okay, so to do that, you can actually use a format called blob. Okay, so blob is something. It's like a data chunk. Okay, it can contain anything. It can contain a map. It can contain a list. It can contain any other data type you want to deal with. Okay, so you can use this using blob storage. So as soon as you go on, you study more about how databases work and what are the functionalities regarding it. You'll be able to encounter blob a lot. Okay, Yeah, so blob, I think it stands for big, large object binary, I think. Blob. Yeah, binary large object. Okay. So it's a collection of all the binary data and it is stored as a single entity into a database. So it can be anything. It can be an image, audio, multimedia object, a list, map, anything. Okay. So there are types of blob respective to the database which you use. So likewise, you can do an experiment with that. So now since you are able to print that, absolutely you'll be able to use that also inside the application. Okay. You just have to again populate this data using a future builder uh, into your application, and you can just populate the data inside your text widget easily. Oh, my camera is off. Okay. Am I visible now? Okay, so I think it was helpful today, like what we learned. Okay. So I want you guys to experiment to actually try all the queries. You already have this documentation with you, SQLite, SQLite tutorial.net. You can proceed with that. I will. Okay. I will just put this inside a folder. So if you guys want to experiment, you can absolutely do that. If you have any question, then you can absolutely shoot them. No, actually, there are different kind of databases. Okay, so there are SQL databases and there are NoSQL databases. Okay, so MongoDB, let's say, is a NoSQL database, and you could deal with Firebase. So these are all document-based storage. Okay, these are based on the documents. Okay, so a collection is something in which documents live. Okay, and into those documents, you can insert your data, and they have strict typing. Okay. Uh, yeah, see, Amanpreet. Okay, there's one more thing in Flutter called shared preferences. Okay, so there's shared preferences and there's SQLite. So generally, what happens? Companies store a small chunk of data when it comes to shared preferences, and in SQLite they can store a lot of data. Okay, so but people are still, for some people, shared preferences is easier to use, so they stick with that. But you have to make sure like what kind of data and what amount of data you are dealing with. So let's say you have an application and which changes your theme about what you tap. Okay, I install this application and I want to save my theme to dark mode. Okay, so that thing is okay to be stored in shared preferences. That's how you deal with that. Okay, let's say you're using a app like WhatsApp, and you want to mute someone's notification. So you don't want to store this mute boolean into your server side code. You want to store it offline, right, into your device only. So you can use for storing this thing, you can use shared preferences. There is no point of creating an entire table in SQLite to store that kind of small information, right? So for that kind of thing, you should go with shared preferences. And for that kind of structural data, like we are creating, like we created a person class and we wanted to store it. So in that case, you should go with SQLite. Okay, am I able to explain it correctly, Amanpreet? Yeah. Varun, you asking that is it the right approach to use both internal and external database, like copy data from external to internal and then process? This totally depends on the use case. Let's say you're using an API, okay, and that API will actually fetch your personal data into your application, okay. So you don't want that data to be fetched again and again, because the company is also aware that your data is only going to change when you're going to change it, when you're going to edit it from your profile. Okay. So that data, you want it to be stored, and you don't want your API calls to get wasted again and again calling it whenever you tap on your settings, right? Varun. So for that case, you should store these kind of information into your local DB in SQLite. Yeah, absolutely. You have to synchronize your data, and you can do it on a tap of a button. Let's say when you are editing something, so your data will get synchronized instantly. So you will never call read API call on that. Okay, you will only call it once, and that will be when the user installs application for the first time. Okay, Varun. After that, you will just store that data into your local DB, and when the user comes and edits his profile, then only you will synchronize it with respect to your server side API call. Okay, so that's how you can go with that, right? So like what used to happen in TikTok is, TikTok was this video streaming application with continuous videos. So what they used to do is they used to create a local DB into our devices, okay, and they used to store our ad preferences, like which kind of ads we are watching, which kind of ads we are, what is the duration exactly, which kind of video I stayed longer for more than 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So these things used to get stored into a local DB inside our TikTok DB. Okay, let's say it's a TikTok DB. Okay, so they got synchronized every day in a 24-hourly manner, right? So TikTok could not support like updating everything instantly, because they had these cloud functions written. They had these Lambda functions written, which just creates creates these recommendation list for a particular user. If one person is watching a lot of videos of Narendra Modi, so he will be subjected to that kind of content only. And these server side processing cannot happen on a frequent basis. So they need to actually localize their data into the user device. Okay, and once they are done, that exact SQL snapshot is sent into their servers, and the servers have these Lambda functions or these cloud functions written. Okay, and they process the data, and then they return a particular suggestion list. Okay, recommendation list, and that suggestion list is then synced with the device, and based upon the suggestion list, they show the videos. Okay, so that's how TikTok used to take our data and process it to show us the relevant content. Okay. Yeah. So TikTok was kind of a instant social media kind of service. Okay. So it did not have an option to select something. You were just subjected to a particular kind of data, and if you were interested, then you had to go with that. Yeah. Yeah. Varun. Absolutely. Or you can just create a synchronous task as well, like processing a particular data. But if you want to do it in the background, then absolutely you have to use a sync. Or you can absolutely, there's actually a context switching based in Flutter, which allows you to do things in the background. Okay, yeah, background fetch and background processes. Dart has its own code written. So yeah, these are different plugins you can use and check it out. Okay. Yeah, so if something already exists, then there is no need to recreate it or write code for that. Okay. Okay, so I have updated day 4. So if you guys are interested, you can just go inside and check it out. Okay. Role of responsive and adaptive layout. Are you talking about layout which is responsive with respect to the screen sizes or which adapts with the theme of the phone? Okay. Yeah, so responsiveness is very, very important when it comes to Flutter application, but most of the time Flutter is very easily able to handle that responsiveness. But sometimes what happens that devices have different pixel density. Okay, so at that time you have to take care. Okay, so let's say a device has a pixel density of 720 dpi, but the device on which you are developing, it has a dpi of 360. Okay, so at that time there may be issues because dpi changes things a lot. Okay, so for that you have to make sure that you use scalable sizes, like we use media query, right? So media query will actually take care of that DPI as well. Okay. So single child scroll view actually will allow you to create. It's just like similar to list view. Okay. Yeah, yeah. You can try that. You can try that. Anyways. Okay. Okay. So I think it's all right for today. So thank you so much for joining up, and I'm really sorry that it take a lot of time. Like it's been like 2 hours, but I'm really thankful to you all that you all stay for this much duration.